I want to move on to talk about Jimmy Kimmel. Briefly cancelled for about a week. He's back on air. He was taken off air by ABC after he essentially insinuated that the Charlie Kirk assassin, or alleged assassin, was a MAGA Republican, which he clearly was not. So, Mark, he's back. Democracy is saved. Fascism is over. We can rejoice.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that I breathed a sigh of relief to see him reinstated, because the worst thing that could have happened is that he got fired and he becomes a martyr of the progressive left in America. And he certainly would have come back somewhere else, possibly online, possibly on another network. But what's going to happen is that he'll go back, or he has gone back on air. He's had his moment in the sun with, well, I think 20 million views of his monologue on YouTube alone.
Yeah, and it
in a
had
few days.
6 million viewers, 4 times as many on the network. It was an 18-minute monologue, which is quite a lot.
Yeah, well, that's it. He knew people will be watching. And but what will happen now is that it's good. It's actually good news for everyone that he's back on air, because then there isn't the free speech, the concern about free speech in America, and the double standards of the right that you pointed out very well in the Telegraph just the other day. It was a great piece. And so I personally am a bit torn on this one, because fundamentally he shouldn't have been fired for what he said. But it was nice just to enjoy the moment. To light a Cuban cigar and just with a little brandy on the go, just going, okay, for 5 minutes, we're going to see somebody with all the right opinions cancelled, which has been the albatross around, over the shoulders of anyone that centre or centre-right in the past, the several few years. The cancel culture has been the domain of the left. And it is unfortunate that there are lots of people who did celebrate his sacking. I watched the monologue, his response to it, and I thought it was fine. I mean, he started crying at one point, which is something he does from time to time, which, okay, he's very sincere. He wears his heart on his sleeve. But I just think it fits in with a feeling that it's all about him. It's all about Jimmy Kimmel. The Charlie Kirk thing, I heard a commentator recently say that if it was George Floyd, comedians would have waited a week or two before doing jokes about it. But Kimmel was straight in there. And what I will say is that, yes, Donald Trump is his nemesis, and Donald Trump is a divisive man. He is provably divisive, right? That's his brand, is to divide. However, people like Kimmel are just as divisive and just as guilty of the tribal warfare as Trump or anyone else.
Yeah.
And I think that's why he's got his fingers burnt, by getting too close in the sort of tribal warfare.
And Tom, he's experienced this sort of, I guess, a sort of 7-day trial period of cancellation. That's probably the most that many liberals would ever receive. And really, that's a good thing. You kind of want people not to be cancelled, regardless of where they stand and what they say.
Oh, no, of course. I suppose there are a couple of complicating factors here. One of which is that obviously cancel culture is an absolute scourge. And it is worth pointing out the disparity between things that people were getting cancelled for in the wake of Charlie Kirk's murder, assassination, and things that people were getting cancelled for in the wake of George Floyd's murder and the whole Black Lives Matter hysteria. So Jimmy Kimmel goes on his national television show and just spouts provable lies, whether or not it was misspeaking, whether or not it was something that he didn't intend to do, insinuating that the killer, Tyler Robinson, who even at that point was pretty clear wasn't part of the MAGA crowd, as he insinuated, is something that an employer would take an interest in. Should he have been summarily sacked? Almost certainly not. But it's not illegitimate for someone to say you can't spread nonsense on our airwaves, for instance. There is also, if you contrast that with the kinds of things that heads were rolling over in June of 2020, I mean, the Poetry Foundation in the US, which is this huge organization, various of its leaders had to step down because their statement that they put out in solidarity with Black Lives Matter was deemed to be too short. Two people had to resign in shame for doing so. So there's a kind of disparity there. The other thing is, makes it more of a free speech issue, I would think, rather than a editorial decision to can him shortly, or a strictly business decision, because of the fact that there was not only backlash to the monologue, but also, along with a lot of these late night shows, Kimmel's ratings have been cratering for a very long time, was the intervention of the government, was the fact that you had the FCC chair, Brendan Carr, very openly saying on a podcast that if ABC don't do something about Kimmel, we will, or else. And that is the point in which this does become a free speech issue. You've got the state trying to, as is often described in kind of American free speech debates, jawbone private institutions to get rid of people or to sack people or what have you. So there was obviously a free speech issue there. But I also think about the disparity between the way in which this case has been talked about. People on the American liberal left were more upset by Jimmy Kimmel being taken off air for about 6 days, I think, than they were about Charlie Kirk being assassinated for the views that he had. So if that's your free speech core celeb, as opposed to the man who was gunned down purely for expressing opinions on a university campus, I dare say you're not on the right side of the argument.
Yeah. Mark, anything to add?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that essentially Jimmy Kimmel has entered the political arena. And the offending part of his monologue wasn't even a joke.
Yeah.
It was just calling out, or as you say, claiming that this guy was somehow part of the MAGA crowd or his family were MAGA, that sort of thing. And so therefore, if he'd been taken down for a harsh but satirical joke, a kind of Frankie Boyle or Jimmy Carr style joke, well, then that would be a black and white case of, this is free speech. He was making a joke. But Kimmel wasn't even a bit of the monologue that was funny.
Yeah.
And I think that's how far down the rabbit hole these folk have gone. Whether it's Kimmel or Stephen Colbert, who's outgoing now. And then we know that over at Fox News, Gutfeld is storming ahead in the ratings. But it's going to carry on. The late night shows have become the platform for the culture wars to play out. It's actually been a perfect sort of rebrand for Kimmel.
Yeah.
Who's energized by this. And I do think you mentioned the American equivalent of Ofcom, who got involved.
The FCC.
And Brendan Carr, the FCC. And that was unedifying. He sounded like a gangster or something. Yeah. Like a scene from Goodfellas. It's like, well, there's an easy way to do this or a difficult way. I'll let you choose. So that was embarrassing. And obviously Trump has been completely puerile about it. But then that's priced in with Trump, isn't it? I will say, echoing your excellent article in The Telegraph, that the right missed a trick by not fighting for Kimmel to keep his job. Too many celebrated. I think I equivocated on X and just, it was of that flavour of, well, this is fun. But I've always been clear that he shouldn't have lost his job. I'd rather that he just dwindled because of how tediously ranty the show has become and witless. I mean, Colbert, sorry to go on about it, but I keep an eye on those US talk shows, and it was like a couple of years ago. I was like, let's see what Colbert's up to. And I jumped on a couple of the monologues, and it was about Trump. But it was like 2022. I was like, you do know that he's not president anymore. And he's still ranting about Trump, even though the president at the time was the cognitively challenged Joe Biden, but not a squeak about him, of course.
Exactly. No comedy material to be mined there.
No.